by the military-industrial complex.
And now, the Taliban will pay a price.
Do we have the confidence to do in the Middle East what our fathers and grandfathers accomplished in Europe and Asia?
The situation in Afghanistan is deteriorating.
What I do oppose is a dumb war.
Okay, season 2 of the Boardwalk is finally here after 6 very long weeks. If you're joining us for the first time for whatever reason, I'm Zach, and along with me are my good friends Stu and Kyle. If you guys want to introduce yourselves again to the audience.
Hey, it's Kyle here. Welcome back to season 2. I took over editing duties from Zach from like the last 4 episodes, so I'll be doing that this season. We got a pretty cool introduction. We got some sound bites from politicians playing, and yeah, it's been a good time off. I've been pretty busy. I worked in the Army before I was a contractor with these guys, so that's where we all met. I'm not going to rehash a lot of stuff you can learn from episode 1. Go ahead, Stu.
Yep. Hey, it's very, very awesome to be back. It's good to see you guys again. Definitely missed this. I'm Stu. I am potentially the video editor. We're gonna try to throw this thing on YouTube. I guess we'll see how that works. But yeah, definitely good to be back. I was also a contractor and a Army soldier before meeting these two, so good to be back.
So yeah, you might be able to tell by by Stu and Kyle. I also was a contractor in Afghanistan. Obviously, that's where we all met, was in Kandahar. Before that, I did 7 years in the Army as an analyst as well. My wife wanted me to remind people how the Boardwalk got the name. And that's fair. We haven't really talked about it since season 1, episode 1. The Boardwalk is named after the Kandahar Airfield Boardwalk, which was situated over by the DFAC, or the dining facility, and across the street from the living area. It's a roughly half-mile square wood-covered structure that's quite literally a boardwalk. And at times there were shops scattered throughout it. There's a TGI Fridays, but we didn't have that, which that's fine. I didn't want to go to a fucking TGI Fridays in Afghanistan. I don't want to go to TGI Fridays in America, for that matter. That's one good thing the millennials did, is they killed TGI Fridays and Applebee's. Good job, cohorts. But they had, the kebab house, which we talked with Leo, the owner of the kebab house in season 1. But what we would do is after we would eat lunch, we would go and we'd walk the boardwalk. And usually we'd walk about a mile, and we'd talk about anything and everything. And we wouldn't always agree, but we always ended the conversation with a smile and went back to work. So the original idea was to do a current events podcast, and then we realized how much there was to talk about Afghanistan. And so here we are. And if you have been listening since season 1, pretty much this episode, we're going to be covering what happened since the last episode of season 1, which I believe came out on the 18th of September. And so we're going to go from there to roughly now. Before we get into that, there were a few things we did in the absence of recording this podcast. So we were very fortunate to hop on another podcast called The Kogan Conversation, which is ran by a good guy, Alan Kogan, and his producer / better editor than us, Grant Brown, who they had us on to just kind of talk about what happened in Afghanistan, and maybe what is the role of the U.S. military when it comes to matters like nation building. And I think that's something that the more the three of us talk about, we might look at doing a standalone episode about like the military and State Department's role and issues like that. But we did that with our good friends over at the Boardwalk Podcast. Part 2 actually came out yesterday, which was the 25th of October. So if you haven't listened to those, head on over to the Kogan Conversation, and we'll tag them so you can find them. And then separate from that, Stu and Kyle did a little Q&A on Clubhouse with the Institute for Research in Stability and Conflict, which is a relatively new little nonprofit, and they had a lot of talking a lot about just Afghanistan and the special immigrant visa program and just what the fuck happened in August. So that was awesome. We've been kind of in touch with them. They said there's a recording. We're still kind of holding out for that. So Cass and Juliet, if you're hearing this, if you could send us that, we'd love to get that thrown onto our podcast. If not, that's okay too. We'll live. But we got a lot of shit lined up for this next season. We actually did a little bit of preparation. We got a little Google Docs amongst the three of us with, I think we got about a dozen topics here that are relatively well fleshed out. We're going to, obviously it's going to be mostly Afghanistan centric, but we're going to talk a little bit about things outside of Afghanistan that affected it. Namely, we're going to do an episode in the future talking about the war in Iraq and how that changed the war in Afghanistan. And we might even do our conspiracy theory episode this season. Who knows? So yeah, we're all back. And it's like I said, it's just a little Word document, right? So I guess we'll go with the first thing we have on here. It's mostly chronological, except for this first nugget that we have written on there. As of last week, there are still about 370 Americans left in Afghanistan. Of those 370, about 180 still do want to leave. So I bring that up because the following bullet, and I think the biggest thing to happen. Well, actually, let's backtrack. So, in the 6 weeks that we stopped, or since we had our season 1 finale, the world has resumed normal operations because no one gives a shit about Afghanistan anymore.
I think we called that too, didn't we? Like, this will be in the news for about 6 weeks or less, and then nobody will care. And sure enough.
Yeah, what is it, 2003 again? Jeez.
Yeah. Basically, like we may as well go back to Baghdad at this point. But nobody cares about Afghanistan again, and instead, Joe Biden's trying to tell us that a $3.5 trillion bill is going to cost $0. We should really think about who we vote for. But that's a separate issue for one day, a separate podcast. Maybe.
No, you just print the money, man. It's awesome.
That's right. Money printer go burr. So as of about a week ago, there's about 370 or so Americans still in Afghanistan, of which roughly half want to get out. I assume most of them are probably Afghan Americans, which would explain why some don't want to leave and why some are still there. Because I'm not seeing a lot about these Americans who are left over there being part of an NGO or anything like that, who kept calling what that just shit show at Hamid Karzai International Airport. They kept calling it a success.
And that's what we talked about, at least Stu and I, and what we all talked about on the Kogan conversation we were on there, is the fact that it's rather shameful that we left all those Americans behind, and soldiers were not the last ones out, right? I mean,
yes,
that's the whole job, is to protect the American people, and we definitely failed in that. So the fact that, Millie and Austin and them can go testify and say that it was successful is certainly interesting. Seems like a massive failure.
Yeah, and it was, even more nationally embarrassing that the British and a few other countries were out there getting not only their people but our people over to the airport. It's just ridiculous. And then our leadership on the ground was criticizing them for doing what they were doing, which is their job, to get the civilians out. Like, zero accountability there.
I was listening to some of the testimony that Millie, Austin, and Mackenzie had given over the 6 or so weeks, and they do kind of explain how they're seeing the Kabul evacuation as a success, and technically they're not wrong, but we'll flesh into that. They were aiming for about 90,000 people evacuated is what General Austin was saying. And I have no way of knowing whether he's saying that after the fact or if that was truly the goal. I don't recall hearing 90,000 before they started the non-combat evacuation operations, or NEO as they're known. But he at least testified to the Senate Armed Services Committee that the goal was 90,000. We ended up pulling 124,000 people out. So yeah, sure, fine. If he wants to call that a success, great. However, we had to it was a success because we had to make fucking lemonade with the lemons that we weren't supposed to have. And that's what they keep glossing over, right? And Joe Biden is guilty of this as well. General Milley is guilty of this as well. General McKenzie is guilty of this. It's very angering when politicians and, in this case, high-level military leadership, they take
thing.
a really. That's a good point. They take something, and yeah, sure, you can find some silver linings in this shit, right? But they're harking on it like it's this great grand success. Like, we had to do that because you failed to plan. And Secretary Austin sitting here saying in his testimony, he's talking to, I think it was Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma, saying that he had this big grand plan. Going back to June and July, that we're going to get a couple infantry battalions out there, a Marine Expeditionary Unit. He was planned and he was ready for this non-combat evacuation operation. That does not look like that. It didn't look like a planned operation. Did it look like a planned operation to you guys?
Not at all. It was kind of like a oh shit operation is what it was. It was a reactionary operation. It was not a planned operation.
Yeah.
Entirely last minute and yeah, completely reactionary.
Exactly. And so when they're talking, more senators, they're asking a lot of stuff that we've already talked about, so I'm not going to rehash it. But they did ask about why not Bagram, right? Something that we had talked about before they'd really answered it. Outside of, the capital is Kabul. That was really the running answer we were getting. And basically the reasoning was that the embassy was in Kabul, which I think is a stupid answer. Because
it's a tough 30-minute drive, man.
Yeah, they're not looking at it from a force protection standpoint, but they're supposed to be. They're only in charge of the entire fucking military. This makes it makes no sense that they've had weeks, because this testimony was, I believe, the end of September, so they've had about a month, right, to come up with a fucking answer, and that was the best they could do. Is that the embassy was in Kabul. That's stupid. Right, and then somebody asked, I think it was the senator from Nebraska, I can't remember her name. She asked, why did we not start, or it was Senator Gillibrand, why did we not start withdrawing embassy officials, State Department officials, just Americans sooner? And it was like, the Afghans asked us not to. Oh, so, and this is not a slight to the Afghans, but we fucking care now?
Yeah, we never cared before.
We didn't even have them at the goddamn negotiating table with the Taliban in Doha, and now we care about their thoughts when it comes to us leaving, knowing that we were going to leave.
And you mentioned that not having them at the negotiating table. I mean, if there's anything that says that we did not view the Afghan government as legitimate in their own right, is the fact that we negotiate on behalf of them. Basically, they're simply a U.S. proxy at this point.
Isn't that what Zalmay Khalilzad was supposed to be for? We're going to talk about him later.
Yeah, we'll get to Zalmay here later. Yeah,
that piece of shit. So, anyways, that was the big thing that came out regarding why not Kabul. Something that Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, who I don't like Tom Cotton. He most famously lied about being a Ranger. He was able to get from Generals Milley and McKenzie and Secretary Austin that they did recommend to the president to maintain that 2,500 troop level past the deadline, which we have harked on that as well. This is a terrible idea. And those three individuals were not unique in that position. Hell, Senator Cotton wanted to maintain a troop presence of 2,500 after the deadline. Half of Congress wanted to. Almost every Republican wanted to, or at least the war hawks like Lindsey Graham, who don't have to go and actually fight wars. They all wanted us to maintain a presence out there, as if having 2,500 Americans just perpetually in Afghanistan was going to change anything. And I know we kind of talked about it with the Alan and Grant and Luke and Curtis when we did the Kogan episodes, but that wasn't going to affect anything. All it was going to do was create 2,500 new targets for a country that's ran by the Taliban. Not even effectively ran, literally ran by the Taliban.
Yeah,
the Taliban
but it
tolerate
kind of
anyway. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it kind of goes right along with the direction the war had been going for the past 8 to 10 years. You were continuously drawing down, but still somehow expecting that, oh well, we have a troop presence over there. When we started pulling more and more troops out after 2014, they somehow the Taliban were able to continuously push and take ground and maintain control of more and more areas, and that coincidentally coincided with the fact that we had fewer and fewer U.S. troops and resources. So
It's like a
they're just desperate to have any kind of presence out there, and it probably has to do something with the Pentagon and connections to multi-billion-dollar war profiteering corporations that they work with. I suspect that probably had something to do with it.
For sure. I mean, it's like a gambler, buying into the sunk cost fallacy. Just keep throwing good money after bad. Eventually, you're just hanging on. Like, why? 2,500. Like the Taliban won't even tolerate it. It's just like we have to be there. Like, why? Why do we have to be there?
Yeah. And people keep pointing to Europe, like us being in Germany post World War II. Well, I mean, listen, this is how you can tell that people have never stepped outside of their bubble. We are we're cousins with the Germans, right? Like we're all that Anglo European ancestry type shit. We've got similar cultural values. There may be some slight differences, like Germans don't hunt as much as dudes from Tennessee and North Carolina, but we're all biological cousins in a sense, right? There's cultural similarities. Yeah. Us being in Germany is not stopping anybody from doing shit. We're just in Germany, yeah. Right? But these are the same generals, or they're of the same mindset. The people that think that us being in South Korea is deterring the North Koreans. I completely disagree with that. Right? What's deterring the North Koreans is that their fucking army is literally starving to death. Right? South Korea's got all the weaponry in the world they need to take on the North Koreans, but you'll have these generals who go, well, if we left the Korean Peninsula, North Korea would take over. It's like, no, they wouldn't. Right? These generals only know military stuff. They only know warfare. And Stu and I were talking about this before we hit the record button. And they're all going to get fucking C-suite positions at these defense contracted companies. They're going to start their own consulting firm. They're going to be viewed as experts. When, if we take a step back and really look at it, all of these experts on the news who are sitting there saying what we should do here and there when it comes to national defense, all they've done is lose 2 fucking wars in the last 20 years. Why is anybody taking them seriously?
That's a good point. How do you lose 2 wars and be consulted as an expert on warfare? At this point, you're done. But we keep bringing them on because that's the pipeline, man. That's the pipeline.
And to not put it completely on them, Curtis from the Panjshir podcast very poignantly pointed out that a lot of this also falls on the State Department. So we'll State Department officials who do the same shit that those generals do. They leave the State Department. They become consultants and analysts for the media. They're equally terrible at their jobs. But General McKenzie, in that testimony, he proposed in 2020 4,500 troops. Well, the extra 2,000 would still have made no impact.
Yeah, like what would the difference have been? Would they have tried to militarily lock down Kabul or something? Like, what? There's no difference. But putting out a number, other as you're withdrawing from the country, like some bullshit like number to be thrown out there, like it's actually going to make a difference. It's just not.
Yeah,
and that's the bottom line. They're trying to cover their asses at this point and make it seem like, oh well, if only I had that's the biggest cop out of any military leaders. Oh, if only I'd had the resources I need. Well, you never do. But you could have planned this better. Right. You could have started pulling people out sooner. You could have pulled them out from Bagram instead of Kabul. I bet you're probably in private meetings. They probably have had it brought up that Bagram would have been a better answer, but they maybe were trying to throw the Afghans a bone somehow, as if it would matter.
It's pretty obvious they didn't expect the whole country to fall basically overnight. I mean, if they did, they probably planned for more time and they didn't have it. And
Yeah.
which leads to many other questions, like how was all
So
this
that was-
conducted behind the scenes? Like how the
Yeah.
hell did the Taliban conduct these, negotiations with the Afghan army behind the scenes?
And
So that was something
given the
that-
course
oh,
of the
go ahead,
war,
Steve.
how do you not plan for the worst possible scenario? Like, just in case things don't go perfectly for us, they've gone perfectly the last 20 years. Just in case though, let's make sure we have a plan.
Yeah, and that's something that that was brought up during the hearings, right? They asked for their opinions regarding the um, potential for the Afghan government come August, right, or right before August. And General Milley was saying his analysis, which is the incorrect term, it's his assessment, um, but his analysis was that the Afghan government would make it to the winter. You guys were saying that it was going to be just fine, right? President Biden was out there saying they have 300,000 soldiers and they have the best equipment in that area, which is true. They do have the best equipment in that area. Well, they did. The Taliban government has the best. They're the best equipped military in Central Asia now.
Yeah, selling our weapons on the streets. And also, take it easy on Joe. He said what the nice people told him to say. Okay. It's not
But I
be too
mean,
harsh
that's
on
true.
Joe.
Stops with him.
If Milley said that they thought it would last through the winter, then that's a huge walk back from, like you said, Zach. That's a big old step back from we've funded them and their army is ready and their government's ready. That's a huge walk back.
I mean, shoot, us being out of the game for a period of time before we started recording this, we were thinking, like between 5 and 10 provinces would fall. Like we're on the fringe of falling, like as soon as we were out of there, and it even exceeded our meager expectations. But the people that were looking at the situation probably should have been more aware than they were. And I absolutely blame like the upper middle level commanders that were probably lying to try to make their try to make themselves look better for their careers, because somehow Afghanistan's failings are going to affect your career afterwards.
Yeah. So two things, right? One, I think our official assessment, because we started out as a Kandahar centric or Southern Afghanistan centric podcast, our official assessment from the Boardwalk, with the new logo, by the way, is that Kandahar would fall probably in September,
Right.
and we thought from there were the South would fall, and you see like the old Northern Alliance Taliban lines in the sand, and holy fuck, were we wrong?
Yeah, it was way worse than that.
Yeah, we're not wrong very often. Like when we were in Kandahar, we were pretty good at our jobs, right? Like we're not the world's greatest analysts, but holy fuck, we weren't wrong very often. The second thing is when I was watching this congressional testimony or Senate hearing or whatever you want to call it, I thought to myself, instead of having these senators talk to these generals and Secretary Austin, they should have had like junior fucking intel NCOs and junior intel officers and like a specialist who doesn't say fuck every other word ask the questions.
That's tough to
they could have
find,
done better.
shit.
You can. It wouldn't even have to be taken from active duty. You just find a bunch of people like us to just go and like, if you want to pay for my plane ticket, I will go tell you exactly why it was messed up.
Yeah,
Like,
I'll even color a map for you as long
Luke.
as you don't make me use your bullshit,
D6.
Requirements. Yeah.
So Curtis and Luke, the guys from Panjshir, this is not a knock on them, right? But they're infantry guys. They're combat arms. That's a very direct role in the army. And I mean, they're able to see it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're out there with the Afghan army doing patrols and shit with them. They're like, this is not going to fucking work.
Yeah.
We saw it at the equivalent of like fucking junior or like mid-level NCOs. Like we saw it. Junior officers saw it. Yeah, we'll go with that.
You don't even need to be an NCO. You don't even need to be an NCO. You just need to be a PFC who had to spend like an hour with the Afghan army to know that it was under.
No, for sure, right? But like everybody saw it up until like the rank of colonel,
Right.
right. So let's get some people who are like 04, which is major and below, and like E6 staff sergeant and below, and like 2 or 3 crusty warrants or warrant officers for the civilians in the audience to go up there and have them ask the questions.
Right. Yeah.
Because you're going to get much different questions. That you're not going to have people who are trying to get sound bites for re-election. Like Senator Gillibrand, she started out her 5 minutes of questioning by pointing out that she's proposed a bill to draw back the War Powers Act, which would limit the president's military capabilities or his military authorities without a declaration of war. On the surface level, that sounds like a great fucking bill, but this is not the forum for that, right? We're trying to get answers for what the hell happened in Kabul. Right. So let's get some fucking green suiters up there on Capitol Hill to ask the real questions.
Yeah.
Like General Milley, when you were chief of staff in the army, and we told you that this shit wasn't going bad or this wasn't going good. Yeah. And you were like, okay.
Or no, rather when he was told the Taliban were staring defeat in the face and he corrected them.
Correct. You're right, Stu. But then you move one more rung up. It's like, we're making progress.
Right.
The Afghan, they got those great M4s, the M16s, that we're getting rid of those. They got red dots. They got all this cool shit. Oh yeah, helicopters, you name it. Bradley fighting vehicles, sure, they got them.
Yeah.
What could be the possible incentive to lie the way he is? Like you have your next jobs like set up already. Like he has his following jobs set up for sure because he's made all the connections over the course of his career. Like he's probably had shit lined up since he was a 1-star.
I think it's hubris. I think they don't want to be the guy that lost the war.
Yeah.
So they'll say what they have to push it along to the next guy. Now, the immediate counter argument to that is General Milley doesn't have to become chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He can go, no, I'm going to retire as chief of staff in the Army and be the next guy's war to lose, right? So, sure, it's possible that that's not at all what he thought, and maybe he really did think this was a winnable war, and we just needed more time and 3,000 fucking soldiers.
Like we got a lot of custers in the military right now. just like can't comprehend the possibility of failure and trying to salvage a situation instead of just riding headlong into it.
The rule of thumb for fighting a counterinsurgency is 10 soldiers, 10 Americans to 1 insurgent, which would have put us at about 700,000 Americans in Afghanistan. And that's the combat arms guys, right? That's just 1/2 of the solution. So double it, 1.5 million people.
Probably more. It's probably closer to like 1 to 4.
Maybe.
For every dude on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in that testimony, General Milley did point out from the Doha agreements that there were 7 conditions for the Taliban to meet. They met 1. That was to not attack the U.S., which is why the Afghans had those record casualties that we've talked about. And then he went on to point out that there were 8 conditions for the Americans to meet, and we met all 8 of them. Okay, great, good, cool. Like, of course we were going to meet those conditions. We wanted to leave, right? The Taliban wanted us to leave, but they're not going to disavow Al-Qaeda. They're not going to become a fucking counterterrorism partner in Afghanistan, right? That was never going to happen. And for whatever reason, we got to the evacuations at Kabul, and they were providing that exterior security, and that should have never been the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what kind of blows me away? The fact that no one's tried to correct the counterterrorism thing and say, oh, we meant against ISIS, because they didn't mean against ISIS. They actually somehow imagined that the Taliban's greatest sponsor in the area, as far as training, as far as supplying experts for building IEDs and for like weapons manufacture and for developing like clandestine like communication strategies so they'd be less likely to get caught. Like Al-Qaeda has done everything for the Taliban, and they've supported them throughout the war. Yet somehow we got it, or the leadership got it through their heads that the Taliban would turn their back on them because their hated enemy for the last 20 years brought them to the table for it. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. And I think the only thing more ridiculous than that, well, actually not even more ridiculous, equally ridiculous, is the idea of these over the horizon operations, which is that we're going to drone strikes, right?
Yeah,
Well,
that's the next topic on the list.
yeah,
Yeah, let's talk about
Exhibit
that.
1 on how that's not going to fucking work is that when we were there, we killed 10 innocent people 3 days after the suicide bombing at the Abbey Gate at Hamid Karzai International Airport, right? And we had assets on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
The very first thing we did with this over the horizon capability was kill 10 innocent people. So good fucking job. Surely it's going to work when we have no collection capabilities in the country. Our only option will be, long range SIGINT or high altitude SIGINT, right? I mean, we're not going to be able to do anything else, and we'll need to coordinate with Pakistan for airspace permission. We'll have to coordinate with all the countries above Afghanistan, which means we've got to talk to Russia.
Got to talk to the Taliban, who are now our counterterrorism partners in the region per the agreement.
Yeah. Sure.
So so now Taliban have to deal with ISIS as well. So now they have to figure out how to run a country, and they have to figure out how to develop CT capabilities, and that's going to be real hard.
Listen, the two of you right now, would you be surprised if, let's say a year from now, we are aiding the Taliban directly in the fight against the Islamic State in the Khorasan province? Would you be surprised at all?
Not really. I just don't think anybody will come out and just straight up say it. But if we just keep,
it'll be covert.
It'll be all covert stuff. But if that comes out in 40 years from now that we're doing it, no, it wouldn't surprise me at all. We're probably doing it now.
I mean, I can speculate. I can speculate because I have no direct knowledge of it. We probably did when ISIS-K was first coming out there. I mean, we had the big Taliban versus ISIS-K fights in Nangarhar. I don't know for sure. Okay, Culinary Institute of America, but I'm pretty sure we had some assets that were coordinating things. Probably not directly like going to the Taliban and helping them, but probably like getting information to them somehow, or
I could see talking to elders in the village, knowing that they'll talk to the Taliban, like shit like that, psyops, miso type stuff. I could see that happening for sure.
Yeah.
Where we got some hot intel that the Islamic State was gonna, or the Islamic State's gonna attack this riverbed. Okay, well let's plant in their head that the Taliban are gonna be there. And in reality, they'll go to the other place, and then that elder lets the Taliban know. And I have no doubt that happened, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing the CIA does better than anybody else is meddle, right? So no doubt that happened, right? So there was that drone strike, which that was pretty shitty for a number of reasons, right? And one, obviously, you had innocent people who were dead, but then from a rather selfish American capability point of view, it is a direct rebuke to this idea of this over-the-horizon capability because we couldn't do it in theater. Yeah. And it's not like it was a new thing, killing the wrong people with drones. We did it for
years,
a decade.
And the thing is, too, if we're going to rely on Taliban intelligence to direct our drone strikes, we are in for it's like we didn't learn our lesson from people like Gulagh Shirzai and John Muhammad Khan and all those guys. We're basically just going to repeat the same shit and just go bomb the same people that we were supposed to be helping to begin with, because now the Taliban want them all dead. So they'll just claim they're ISIS collaborators and then bam. Like, my God. I mean, you can go online right now. This is a side note, but this is how I feel lately. It's like, if we're going to be working with the Taliban for damn counterterrorism capability, nothing seems real anymore. You can go online and you can buy an NFT of like some pixelated monkey for like $10 million. It's like, is anything real? Like, I mean, are we just like, I don't know.
NFTs are not real.
Yeah, we're getting this weird. I don't know what the hell is going on. So it wouldn't surprise me. Nothing would surprise me at this point.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, so for the. I think I just want to clarify for the listening audience, like in some ways the civilian casualties from airstrikes get overplayed by news media and a lot of people because they're attention grabbing headlines, because there's a lot that goes into a drone strike. If your troops aren't in like direct conflict with somebody and you're trying to just bomb someone, there's a huge procedure that goes on where you have to get specific permissions and you have to have specific proof that the person you're killing is a bad guy. even with all of those, all of that in place, we still made mistakes and we still did kill civilians. Now, with us not even being in the country and not able to provide the same oversight, how are we possibly going to be able to target the right people and confirm that we got the right people afterwards? Like, even let's say everything went perfectly. What's to stop the Taliban from claiming that every single drone strike that we do was against civilians and cause a huge international, outrage at the US just indiscriminately bombing civilians? Like, that's exactly what would happen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's going to be no way to confirm or verify this shit, right? Because even the strikes we did in country, you had somebody on the ground to verify. Yeah, you killed the shadow governor of, fucking Daeshopan. Like, there was somebody there to do it. We don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So every time it happens, the Taliban will just say, "Oh, they killed some guy and his 7 kids," and it'll just piss off the Afghans.
Yeah, because our intelligence networks are completely dismantled in the area. So, being able to figure out who to target and then confirming that you got the right guy is just, there's no chance.
So we can all agree that over the horizon capability then is trash. We shouldn't do it. Okay,
No way.
cool.
I'm not optimistic. No.
No.
But speaking of the Taliban running things, so they've been in charge for 2 months now. So they've only allowed 2 suicide bombings from the Islamic State. One in Kandahar. We're going to talk about that in a second because that's big.
Yeah.
Islamic State was never that far south. But the Taliban is the government. I saw that they still have a national cricket team. They played like Scotland the other day. I don't know if they won or not.
They apparently have a half decent cricket team.
Well, it's a big sport out there. I can see that. They did fly the tricolor Afghan flag, which was cool. So they'll probably all get like lashed or something when they return. That or they just don't have a Taliban flag that big yet because it's a big fucking flag.
It takes some time to manufacture those things. When
there's a labor shortage throughout the entire world right now. So
nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody wants to sew Taliban flags anymore.
That guy in Rawalpindi is like, "No, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go open up a fruit stand or something." Right, entrepreneur. But the Taliban's in charge. Girls can kind of go to school if you live in like Herat and Kabul.
There's a lot of areas where it's. I saw a bunch of news stories where it's getting stamped out.
It is slowly withering away. Actually, it's probably quickly withering away.
And of course, separately, right? You're not allowed to go to school, boys. So.
It's separately. I think it's really like it's mostly in like Kabul, where I just think they know that they can't control 3 million people.
Well, I got an article here that I was reading beforehand that was talking about how in Kabul, like high school girls like are upset that they can't finish school now because of the Taliban. Okay. So it's just like we thought. It was a play by them to try to show a softer side to the world. Now the world's not really paying attention anymore, so fuck it.
Yeah, and I did see that they put out a notice that they would let women know when it was okay to come back to work, which means that they're not going to let them know. And they were saying things like, "Oh, we got to make sure that the work conditions are in line with our Islamic values, which their Islamic values are not Islamic values." We've talked about that before. That anybody would tell you that the Taliban don't represent anything to do with Islam. They might pray 5 times a day. That's probably the extent of the similarities, right? But they've pretty much, women aren't working now. I know prior to that, women could work in the medical field, so they're probably still popping up as nurses and midwives. But outside of that, there's no working for women in pretty much most of Afghanistan. Like Stu was saying, the education's slowly going away where it even was, which means there's probably no girls schooling right now in the South at all, if it's going away in Kabul at this point. And the Taliban don't have any money. Like the government of Afghanistan's broke. We froze their assets. So it's like $10 billion we have that we're just not going to give them for obvious reasons. Yeah. And they're at risk of losing like the electricity because Afghanistan is such a poor country that everything was provided externally, right? They have these massive dams that can be used to generate electricity that the Taliban are in charge of, and they can't fucking run them.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with relying on another country to prop you up for 20 straight years, and really longer than that in many sense, in many ways, is that you're left behind all this stuff that you don't really know how to maintain. And when the government changes, it's just all going to kind of fall apart. I don't know how I feel about the holding the assets thing. I mean, I don't think that money would go to the civilians anyway. I don't think it's really going to get used in any meaningful way to help the people of Afghanistan. So I don't know. It's just,
they're facing a food shortage crisis right now too. Like that recently hit them. There's been a lot of news popping up about that. How people only have like naan to eat, and they're about to hit a pretty rough winter after a pretty rough harvesting season.
It's going to be cold too.
Yeah. You can't eat poppy.
The Taliban, if we give them that money, well, not yet. If we give them that money, it's going to go to pay the salaries of their Taliban fighters, because like this is an authoritarian regime, right? And what do you do to maintain that order and stability? You pay the people who are responsible for being out there in the field, maintaining that order and stability. It wouldn't go to help a fucking single soul. It would go to pay their fighters, which if I were running a, shit heap third world country that had no money and I wanted to stay in power, I got to pay the guys with the guns first. So I get that. But yeah, so now like with that lack of money, with a beyond stagnant economy, with being so overly reliant on external suppliers, like most of Afghanistan's GDP since we showed up in 2001 is foreign aid. Well, now the U.S. has resumed talks with the Taliban government in Doha, out in Qatar, and they're talking about providing vaccines for COVID. Which, hey, that's cool. It's a perishable aid. So I guess that's better than giving them money and say, hey, go buy vaccines with this, $400 million or whatever. Yeah. But then they're talking about humanitarian aid, and if that's going to be, it can't be in the form of money, right? Because it's not going to go to the people. They got to do aid in the form of like rice and grain and like food and medicine. That has to be it. Yeah. If we are going to resume having a relationship with now the Afghan government, we can keep calling them the Taliban, but they are the Afghan government now. And we do care about the people in Afghanistan to an extent.
But that also opens up the door. Like, will the Taliban allow all these NGOs that you'll need to distribute the aid? Are they going to let these people in? Are they going to tolerate Americans being back in their country under the guise of helping, when half of those people are going to be Culinary Institute of America operatives? You know what I mean? Just gathering intelligence on the ground.
And a bunch of sous chefs.
Yeah, sous chefs for CIA. So, I mean, but that's the thing. Isn't that the trouble, though? Is if you don't pay your fighters, they're going to revolt against you because they got the guns. And
you'll have a bunch of robber barons out there, essentially.
Yeah. And if you don't help the people, they're going to revolt against you because they got guns too.
Everybody's got a gun.
Everybody's got a gun. And if things start falling apart and you can't get food to eat, then you're much more willing to use those guns than not. So.
Yep. They're going to start buying up those slick ass M4s off the market.
Oh yeah. Those things will be going for 5 sacks of grain here shortly.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to get to that point where they're going to be just bartering, right?
Right.
I'm curious what the Afghani is worth now. So
we'll get
into
when
that topic, and I'll look into that.
Yeah, back when I first got to back on my first deployment, there was an ATM over in the bazaar on Bagram, and they you could put your card in and get like Afghan money out of it. And I thought it was cool. My mom likes to collect that kind of stuff. I think it was like $20 to 1,000 Afghans back then, and it's just dived from there. So I don't know, it's probably gonna look like some of these yen countries pretty soon.
$20 is 1,819 Afghani as of October 26th, 2:53 p.m., whatever UTC means.
So it's almost twice as bad as it was 8 years ago.
Yes.
So it's a strong economy.
It's bad, and you got to keep in mind, most people don't even barter with the Afghani, pretty much.
No, they use the pack rupee.
They use pack rupee,
So that's going to be a tough one.
So Taliban are
Yeah,
screwed, basically. I mean,
they are.
unless they can get some aid in there, they're going to have a revolt on their hands. And it's like
Yeah.
when you play
Well, and
civilization, the unhappiness gets so bad.
so like with that, the Taliban, they got rid of a lot of sports. Sounds like except for cricket for obvious reasons, but they did go back to their favorite national pastime, and that's targeting the Hazara population. They are. I mean, there's reports all over the place that they're kicking out the Hazaras in Kabul to make room for Taliban fighters to house their families and shit. That they're rounding them up by the dozens in places like Daikundi, which it's hard to tell, man. Daikundi's like a black hole. If information gets out, who knows how accurate it is.
We didn't hear shit from there when we were like
Ever.
down in Kabul or Kandahar.
Yeah, it is a black hole of info for sure.
Yeah. And I also
Right, but-
thought that you were gonna say they reinstated headless goat polo. But
Buzkaji's awesome.
that shit's legit.
I showed some people at work Buzkaji, and they're like, "That is the coolest fucking sport I've ever seen." I'm like, I know that goat's probably a real tender.
How do you show them? Rambo?
No, dedicated to the loyal Mujahideen or whatever, right?
Hey, they
No,
were
it
cool
was just
back
like-
then.
It was a Vice documentary, I think.
For the people that don't know, the Hazaras are the minority Shia population in Afghanistan.
They
And,
look like me. They
look like
Stu, yeah.
they are the long lost descendants of the Mongols as they ravaged Southeast Asia, and nobody
When
likes
Genghis
them
Khan
over there.
was fighting and fucking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's all
so
he did.
there's.
Uncle
I
Khan.
mean,
Uncle
they've
Khan.
always been kind of the punching bag of many governments in Afghanistan. So the Taliban are no exception to the rule. And now that the international eye is not looking, they're, like Zach said, kicking them out of their houses now, using those places to quarter Taliban soldiers, like we said, probably in an effort to get them to not revolt against their leaders.
Yeah.
And killing them, torturing them, removing them from their land.
And their allies aren't around, right? Like
Mhm.
the Hazaras were a part of the old Northern Alliance. And speaking of Northern Alliance,
Gone.
the National Resistance Front is officially like in a guerrilla state. They are still in Panjshir, but they are operating in pockets. Ultimately, what happened is what we weren't sure was going to happen, and the Taliban mustered up a bunch of fucking fighters and went into Panjshir with enough people that the NRF couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Something the
they
Soviets
retreated-
couldn't do. That's to be noted.
Yeah.
The Soviets couldn't do that, and the
Nope.
Taliban did.
Yep. There was once it said the Soviets got into Panjshir, but they couldn't stay, right? They were gone like the next day. Like
Oh,
there's
yeah.
the old Soviet tanks in Panjshir from where they tried to go in.
Right.
The Taliban made it from the southern tip of Panjshir all the way to the northern tip. They were able to do that. The NRF is now just in pockets along the mountains because, again, when you look at Panjshir, it's literally a valley between two ridge lines, right? And there's still posts on Twitter from NRF accounts and people who claim to be NRF accounts, and they can verify and validate some of the pictures. They are still up there. There's still some sporadic fighting going on. I'm sure the Taliban doesn't have a big presence in Panjshir anymore. I'm sure they've got a couple fucking like platoons just driving up and down along the Panjshir River, right? But that's what it is now. Ahmed Massoud, he left. Amrullah Saleh left, which is an understandable thing. They, when you look at this, it's a guerrilla movement. It's an insurgency, right? Well, not
They're
even
in
insurgency. They're not
Tajikistan
trying
now,
to take
right?
over. I believe they're in Tajikistan, which makes sense. They're Tajik.
Yeah.
They're trying to regroup, and I'm sure basically they're waiting, holding out for international aid and support,
Yeah.
which they'll probably get next year.
Russia's
Maybe.
trying to get Tajikistan to chill the fuck out right now because
Yeah,
they're
Yeah,
garnering a
we'll-
lot of support for their movement there.
yeah. So we're not gonna tip our hand on that one. That is an episode. We're gonna talk about just how Russia and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and all them, how they play in the Afghan quagmire. But yeah, for sure, like Tajikistan certainly is more than willing to help, and Russia is they're trying to be diplomatic. I don't think Russia wants the Taliban or Taliban supporters to expand from Afghanistan, but they are trying to be at least outwardly diplomatic about it. But apparently there's a new little fucking movement, and it's Adenor, who was the governor of Balkh province.
No, he wasn't. Ghani fired him, but he still remained governor of Balkh province in the most
That's right.
Sigma male move of all time. That's my favorite story, is that Ghani fired Adenor from being governor of Balkh, and he goes, nah. He was still governor of Balkh the entire rest of the time the Afghan government was around.
Adenor is the most un-warlord looking warlord. Like when you look at them, like you show me a picture of Adenor, I'm like, he's he's in the Ministry of Cultural Affairs. Like, nah, he kills people. It's like, okay, you say so.
Yeah.
Right. So Adenor and Abdul Rashid Dostum, everybody's favorite living war criminal from Afghanistan, because Razak's dead. They have apparently created a new resistance movement.
Are you talking about Sayaf or are you Dostum?
It was Adenor, Sayaf, and I think Dostum is
he
in
part
and out
of it? Yeah, I figured
I know
Dostum
for sure
is
you're
just
right.
living somewhere else.
Yeah, it's Abdul Razul Sayaf, who is up in like the eastern part of Afghanistan.
No,
and
Sayaf's in Herat.
No, Ishmael Khan's in Herat.
Ishmael Khan is in Herat. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, Sayaf's in he's in that Kabul area, or was. I don't know where he's at now, but Sayaf and Adenor have officially announced that they're going to they created a resistance movement, and we'll see how that goes, right? Who knows? It's super fluid. There's really no established foe for the Taliban outside of the Islamic State for them to really deal with. So it could be real. It could not be real. Well, we're going to learn more about that over time, if there really is a second resistance. And if there is a second resistance, if anything, they should just get with the NRF guys, because we know that they can get a hold of Saleh and Massoud and do it that way.
Yeah,
which will probably happen anyways.
And it would seem like, that's a welcome avenue for the CIA to move in and like help things along. But how are you going to connect supply lines? Like we can't really operate out of the stands because that's Russia's territory. And if we tried to operate out of Pakistan, well, there's a lot of Afghanistan between Pakistan and the north. So I don't see them being able to find much success along that route. So yeah, definitely ISIS-K is the big threat to them.
Kyrgyzstan, or we could use the Tajikistan. We can open up intel networks there to get stuff across the border. I don't think that would be too difficult. The problem is, are we? I don't know.
It's gonna be supplies, man. That's the biggest thing they're gonna need. Like I don't know how you maintain it.
I think Taliban, the National Resistance Front sounds good in theory, but the Taliban as a government has a lot bigger problems than the National Resistance Front. Like we talked about, I think ISIS and economic collapse, the most pressing issues, and maybe economic collapse more than ISIS.
Yeah. I agree. And like with Sayaf, he joined the Northern Alliance.
That's right.
Before the Taliban became the government, he was a Northern Alliance guy, and he was a leader, and he's the Pashtun, right? So he was pretty important. So if they can get the band back together, plus Ahmed Shah Massoud's son, then we could see what happens.
It's wild. So many are still alive. That blows my mind.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, he's like 75, and Ishmael Khan's like 75.
Sayef's, I think, is older than so. Sayef's old, dude.
I got it pulled up right here.
It's like 150 in Afghan years.
Yeah, they all look old, though. Ishmael Khan.
He's 74 or 75.
Oh, wow, really? Okay. Yeah.
Damn. He was born in 1946. They don't know what day. So we'll call him 75.
They aren't sure about the year either. But
we're just guessing.
They're spitballing, right?
Yeah. I was thinking Ishmael Khan who actually pledged to the Taliban. So
I don't know. So like Ishmael Khan was, I don't know if he was arrested.
He was captured.
If he did he capture or did he surrender?
It seemed like they just rolled up to him and he surrendered and they took some photos together.
Either way, I haven't heard shit from him since that.
Me either. He may not even been alive, but
he's either dead or under house arrest.
Yeah.
So speaking of rumors of death, my favorite one that has been sparked by the completely non-biased Indian news agencies is that Taliban Supreme Leader Hibatullah Akhundzada is dead. And there's the greatest proof of that is that we haven't seen him. It's been 2 months and not a fucking peep. I don't know if he's even put out a statement.
But how much did we see him even during the war?
And how much did we see Omar?
We saw Omar
trying to
none.
emulate.
Yeah,
exactly.
He emulates Omar, and we never saw Omar. There's only like 2
Absolutely.
pictures of him.
We're not going to find out for years. If he's dead right now, we won't find out for years. They will hide that shit.
No, I think what's more likely is that he is back in Kandahar, and he's doing his thing low key. I would not be surprised. At the same time, if they came out in 2 years and said, "Oh yeah, he died in 2021," like yeah, okay, that makes sense too.
Yeah,
but yeah, he is straight up. He is an acolyte of Omar, right? He reveres him. He has been a believer since day one in 1994. I'm not at all surprised that he would, if it's what he's doing, that he's following in Omar's footsteps of just being as seen as little as possible, which is why like Berater is kind of like the face of the government, even though he's not even the fucking prime minister or president.
Berater is like the Darth Vader to his Palpatine. Like nobody knows, nobody sees the supreme leader of the Taliban. You know,
he's the Dark Jar Jar. It is.
Is this our new thing?
What Star Wars
we just use Star Wars references for? It would work, right? We're going to grow our base like this, coming for that Joe Rogan money.
I kind of hate it because Star Wars is trash, but that's a whole different scenario, you know. But like the original Star Wars,
it's trash now.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The original's good,
okay,
so that's why I'm using the Darth Vader Emperor reference for the.
Just so you know, Grant Brown. The sequels suck.
We'll have that talk later. I'm gonna go into your guys' Patreon and rile up the crew.
But
that's good to me.
Habitullah definitely emulates Omar. So if we never see Habitullah, and honestly, we never saw Habitullah when we were operating. I mean, it's not like he put out statements or anything. It was just
I think he put out like 1 or 2, and it was handwritten, right? It wasn't even like this is me. I'm talking. It was like handwritten shit.
He doesn't make videos.
After his predecessor got bombed, he was like, the discretion of Omar is the better part of valor. I mean,
sure.
Omar was so secretive. That dude was using couriers to send messages to his closest staff members. Like he isolated himself, and he was completely hidden. Like he wasn't. He as far as I know, he never went to Quetta or Peshawar. Like he was just a ghost.
Yeah, I'm sure when we dropped that missile on Mansour's little caravan leaving Iran, I'm sure that wasn't like the first time. Like people they get a DUI. Oh, it's the first time I've ever driven drunk. Man, I'm sure that wasn't the first time he's gone to Iran. And we just happened to get lucky. I think Pakistan got tired of his shit and said, "Yeah, you guys can drop on him."
I think some of the Taliban were tired of his shit too. Like everyone fucking hated him.
For listeners,
we got an IR tracker on his car. Here it is.
For listeners, after Mullah Omar, the original founder of the Taliban, died, he had a successor, Mullah Mansour, who we killed.
Who hid his death from everybody for 3 years. They hid his death.
We had no idea. Yeah. So
and the dude was like issuing edicts as though he were Omar, and I think that pissed off a lot of the Taliban.
It did.
So if Akhundzada is dead, we won't know.
Correct. I agree, especially with Yaqub, with Omar's son. Well, actually, maybe because he would want to be he wants to be in charge. We all know that.
Yeah, it's his birthright.
Yaqub, he's probably the successor, which is why he was moved to number 2, anyways. Right. So when Mullah Mansour became the emir of the Taliban, he shuffled everything up and he made Sirajuddin Haqqani from the Haqqani network the number 2 in the organization, and he made Mullah Yaqub, who was Omar's son, number 3. I believe now officially Omar is number 2 and Siraj is number 3, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with going back into Afghanistan and pretty much with the understanding that when or if Akhundzada dies, that Yaqub will pretty much take up his father's mantle and be the leader of the Emirate of Afghanistan. And Siraj will be happy with P2K.
And to me, that kind of stuff is so interesting. The fact that, we all have smartphones. We all have constant internet access. The fact that somebody can still be a complete secret.
He's using Nokias.
Is just so cool to me. I think that is so cool that the leader of the Emirate is no one. I don't know.
I bet we'll know for sure when Yaqub goes, when Yaqub goes and holds the prophet's the prophet's cloak aloft. Yeah,
Yeah, the cloak.
the way his
and
father
Kandahar.
did. He's definitely gonna do that. There's no way he does it.
It's like a fucking shitty rom-com. It's like, you gotta do it. He has to do it, right?
It's wild to me. I mean, it is crazy that somebody can be that secretive and we really don't know. So,
Yeah.
I mean, good for him staying off social media. I mean, that's a huge thing to do.
Yeah, you don't want to get canceled.
You don't want to have a YouTube channel as the emir of the Taliban.
You see somebody, I saw this tweet you sent out in 2017. You said Hazaras should be treated like people. Explain yourself.
Yeah, we're canceling you, dude. That's not very Taliban of you.
Yeah. So,
But
We
what's
just
the
wanted
next,
to get that aid money, Doc.
so there was a like for like 2 days there was a lot of news reports about China landing at Bagram airfield.
I saw the
And
pictures.
I've seen
Yeah.
right, and we've seen that Taliban officials have gone to Beijing to meet with like Chinese counterparts, right? So we're seeing China start to build that relationship that we kind of talked about on the Kogan conversation that they were going to do. Part of it is they want the lithium and they want the other minerals there. So the most recent estimate is Afghanistan has like potentially $3 trillion in untapped minerals and various resources, not including oil. Otherwise, we'd still be there, right? That China wants, basically, right? China's a booming economy, still is a booming economy, and so they're trying to get in good and pretty much get contracts to start mining that lithium. And there's copper and iron and just all sorts of shit. So I don't think we're going to be too surprised to see increased traveling from like Beijing to Kabul.
Yeah, and
as they try to build that relationship.
possibly aid efforts too. I mean, they're big on moving in, like our buddies at the Panjshir podcast talked about on that Kogan conversation podcast. China's doing a lot of things with a lot of third world countries, especially in Africa, where they're sort of building them up and providing aid and hoping that it'll pay out later and buying up debt. So we'll see.
I still stand by my assessment that I made on Kogan. China is the next empire to die in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
Probably. So now the question is, from the perspective of either the Taliban or China, what do you do about the Uyghur population? Like, how far does the Taliban go to getting money? Do they just overlook it? Do they maybe say, hey, instead of, fucking imprisoning them, send them to Afghanistan where they can be good Muslims with us, and it gives them a pool to recruit from? Like, or do you think they just turn a blind eye?
Well, we know
that's an interesting solution that I hadn't thought of. Yeah, that could work, or they could just not give a shit about them because, well, I mean they're not Iran.
I'm with that.
Like the thing is that the Afghanistan isn't Iran. They aren't like
right.
the worldwide, seeing themselves as like the worldwide center for Sunni Muslims the way Iran is for Shia Muslims. So
correct. I completely agree with you.
They could conceivably just say, hey, we don't give a shit, just work with us because no one else will.
The Taliban has no room to negotiate. And that's the thing. We just talked about the economic collapse. Like, if the Taliban could negotiate, yeah, sure. And if they really did care about the Uyghur Muslim population, okay, that's fine. But I don't think they do.
I don't think they do.
I don't think
I'm trying to.
That could be something that
we are aware of.
China could bring that to the table too, and say, "Hey, we don't want these people in our country. Can you take them?" But I mean, they're happy enough to just kill them as well. So
yeah,
but
they really haven't faced any real international backlash because everything's made in China now. So
yeah.
But
the Taliban government's only recourse would be to instead offer those contracts to Pakistan, and they can't pay like China can pay.
No.
But the thing is, too, is the Uyghur population has historically supported like jihad in Afghanistan against the United States because, and not the whole Uyghur. That's inaccurate. I mean, most Uyghur Muslims don't care, but there are some radicalized Uyghur Muslims there in that part of China that borders Afghanistan that have funded and supported jihad. And that was always so strange to get those videos of the guys with the AKs in the background of the flag flying, but they're definitely just Chinese dudes.
That's the Turkestan Islamic Party.
Yeah, right.
Is that organization, which they call the Xinjiang region Turkestan, which I'm like, they're not Turks, not even close.
Not even close.
Not even close.
They're pretty much fully
whatever.
Chinese now, and it's just
works.
weird seeing like somebody with like that traditional wispy Chinese beard, like pledging to destroy the great state.
Right? Yeah,
it's always funny to me, but
I mean, I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think the Taliban's gonna say no. You need to be nicer to the Uyghurs. I can see China going, "Hey, you want like a couple thousand of them? Like, just make our day a little easier." But I think ultimately money's gonna win out, right? The almighty dollar is king, and China's gonna get what they want, and anybody else, as long as they have enough money, will probably get what they want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's the next topic? Zalmay Khalilzad.
Yeah.
Special envoy.
Last week, I believe it was last week, Zalmay Khalilzad retired, or he resigned, whatever you want to call it. Right? He said he's done. And his reasoning, and I really like that whichever one of you changed the font, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
He resigned or retired because the debate regarding like the ongoing relationship with Afghanistan wasn't rooted in reality. Yet he is the architect behind the Doha Agreement, which is also not rooted in reality.
Yeah.
The idea that the Taliban would denounce Al-Qaeda and then become a counterterrorism partner targeting Al-Qaeda. And Stu, you brought up a good point. If that had said to target the Islamic State in the Khorasan province, absolutely they would have been. They'd be doing that, and they'd be trying to, because we do like some fucking pay-for-play program. Like, hey, every ISKP dude you kill will give you $1,000, and they're just gonna like wipe them out in a month.
You mean those
Right?
people we're trying to kill anyway? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So Zalmay Khalilzad has retired and has the audacity, just the fucking audacity, as Jim Carrey from The Grinch says, the unmitigated gall, to say that the issue is that the argument wasn't rooted in reality. When Zalmay Khalilzad is directly responsible for what happened in August. I don't think there's another way of putting it. He's not solely responsible, but he is directly responsible for that government falling apart. In everybody says 11 days. It was a year and a half. But yeah, sure, 11 days. He's responsible for 13 dead American service members. He was responsible for 170 dead Afghans. Like, he's directly responsible for that. Like, again, not solely, but directly. And for him to come out and say, well, the debate, the conversation wasn't rooted in reality. Are you fucking kidding me? That's the issue with career politicians.
But compared to Milley and Austin, at least he resigned.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a great way to end this podcast, because it's been 2 months and General Milley, General McKenzie, and Secretary Austin, and Secretary Blinken, for that matter, are all still employed in their current role as Secretaries of State and Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and CENTCOM Commander. Something that we have harped on, right? That there is no way that you can tell me that these guys deserve to be in charge, yet here they are being in charge of things. It's absolutely asinine.
Just show a shred of honor and human decency and the ability to take responsibility for your actions and go retire. And then, in a year, in 6 months, go get your board seat. You're going to fucking do it anyway, you dirty asshole. Like, it doesn't matter at this point. What are you presiding over? Do you want, like, are you trying to, like, gain back some street cred off of your career? Like, hey, things didn't go so well there, but did you see how I started things up in Zimbabwe? What the fuck are you waiting for? Like, why stick around in this?
I'll trade all of them for the 180 or so Americans that went out of the country. We can make a prisoner exchange.
Yeah, fuck, man.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, fair enough. Go face the Taliban for your...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, can we do like a Game of Thrones style punishment where we just like parade them through the streets with like some really tall lady screaming or like just saying shame and ringing a bell or whatever? And we get to like throw shit at them, literal shit if we want.
Yeah, but as long as they can't hold a board seat.
Just
Ooh,
have them
yeah.
fight the guy that played the mountain for their for their exoneration. If you could beat that guy, then you won in Afghanistan, and we'll all
So
acknowledge.
here is a quote. Senator Cotton, he asked, and actually, real quick, Kyle, you sent me the clip of Senator Josh Hawley, who he went in hard on those guys, and I appreciate that. Half it was for like re-election purposes, like
Sure.
you get the sound bites. But Senator Josh Hawley, who is again, I'm not a fan of him, he asked, why have you guys not resigned? And General Milley has he's just like, I'm not going to. So before that, Senator Cotton
Just won't.
yeah, Senator Cotton during the like one of the first sets of hearings asked them that same thing regarding General Milley, General McKenzie, and Secretary Austin, pretty much telling the president that this is they shouldn't do it this way. They should do it that way. They should maintain a continued presence and shit like that. And Senator Cotton's like, why didn't you resign? And this is the exact quote from General Milley. It would be an incredible act of political defiance for a commissioned officer to just resign because my advice is not taken. This country doesn't want generals figuring out what orders we're going to accept and do or not. That's not our job. He's not completely wrong, but he's mostly wrong. They're not saying that you should resign because they're not taking your advice. They're saying you should resign because they didn't take your advice and a lot of people died because of it. If you felt so strongly about what you were doing, you should have resigned. General or Secretary Mattis resigned as Secretary of Defense under Donald Trump because he felt so strongly that we should have remained in Syria, which I disagree with, and you guys probably disagree with as well, right? But he felt so strongly that that's what we should do, and we didn't do it, and he, in good conscience, could not follow through on that order, so he stepped down.
And he went and took his board
the three
seat.
of us,
Like, there's no
he did.
repercussions.
He went back to
just go
he went
get your
back to
fucking
General
board
Dynamics.
seat, dipshit. Like, goddamn.
He's back on the board at General Dynamics. That's absolutely correct. He was on the board. He became SecDev, so he got off the board. He stepped down. Now he's back on the board. But I think the three of us can all say we don't have an issue with him stepping down because he, in good conscience, couldn't follow through with that order. Right?
Right.
Like, we're all good with that. So for these three guys to sit here and press the president and say, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do, and he says no, and like, okay, fine, fuck it, we'll just see what happens. Like, no, man, you like part of that resignation is to make a point of how strongly you feel about something, which is why the only person who has been admonished, punished, penalized, arrested for what happened is Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller from the Marine Infantry School East, which, I mean, he should have been admonished because you're not supposed to go on fucking Facebook Live and demand accountability of your seniors, your superiors while you're in uniform. And he knows that. And he's aware that you're not supposed to do that. Right? But he shouldn't be the only person that is held accountable for this.
No, because he's not the one whose fault it is.
No.
Yeah.
Right. But the fact that the people who are directly responsible for it are still in their jobs. That's where we stand on October 26th, over 2 months after it all happened. And like there's still Americans in Afghanistan. Why did we stop evacuation operations a day early?
It just makes you nostalgic for the good old days when McChrystal was in charge. the worst thing a leader did was have a fucking party bus driving across Europe. And at least that guy didn't jump over to a fucking board seat. He just retired on his very generous general pension and fucking disappeared from public view. God, what a legend.
Yeah. I remember when we were just losing the war and hadn't lost the war. Good times. Good times.
Yeah.